Managers, supervisors, and HR people of Reddit, tell me about your worst employees. Best one-day job story I have heard. A friend of mine is a surveyor. They had a kid last one day in employment. They took him out to a rural site and he was told to go out and record the numbers on the surveying pegs on this site. He gets back to the truck about an hour later with an armload of pegs. Instead of writing the numbers down, he pulled the pegs out and brought them back. That was a month's worth of very delicate surveying work wasted. They never saw him again. I've done surveying work. Reading that physically pains me. Senior HR lady puts up an anonymous suggestion box in office. One of the anonymous suggestions pisses her off. She hires a handwriting specialist to compare the note to all current employees' applications on file. She fires the guy for making an anonymous suggestion that management should have a 30-minute lunch break limit like everyone else, or everyone else should get an hour for lunch like management. She should be burned alive as a witch. Oh man, I would lawyer up so hard on that. The general manager's daughter, who was generally reviled by all, had a small argument with a really nice older lady in her mid-60s who's just returned to work after recovering from a heart attack. She threatens that she's going to get the nice old lady fired. Then, realizing she can't do that, tries to get her to sign a bull's paper stating she was disobeying orders. The nice old lady kindly refuses to sign said paper and the daughter storms out of the room and into her office, where she proceeds to slam the door so hard it bounces back and hits her in the head, and then she falls over and takes a desk cornered to her eye. Nobody got up to help her. She eventually got up and drove herself to the ER, and had the most disturbing black eye when she came back to work a week later that lasted for weeks. I started believing in karma after that. Several of my employees have friended me on Facebook. In general, I think this is a bad idea, but I usually accept to not be rude. This one employee was a full-time telecommuter that worked in another state. He would frequently miss deadlines, perform the bare minimum amount of work a human possibly could, etc. All along, he would be posting political and religious rants on FB all day. All day. The best would be how he would use Foursquare to check in at different places like Lowe's while he was AWOL for meetings. I always wondered if he forgot he friended me, or just gave that little of a frick. Not a manager, but an employee at my company used to take her anger out on the girl working in the mailroom. I guess she used to get angry, walk into the mailroom and start accusing her of not delivering her mail to her cubicle. She was asked by HR to never freak out on the mailroom attendant ever again. So she immediately walks out of the HR office, straight to the mailroom and starts freaking out on the attendant for ratting her out. To my knowledge, she is the only employee that required an escort out of the building. We don't have security at our office. She drove away and returned an hour later and stood by the mail attendant's car for a while, waiting for her to leave the office. She ended up leaving after somebody eventually called the cops or something. We had another employee that was skimming a few $100s here and there to help with the bills. She got away with it for a bit, but then took it too far. She was doing a lot of online shopping and having packages sent to the office. She drove a new car every 10 months, which isn't that strange for some people, but for her position, she wasn't making the kind of money to pay for vehicles of the type she was driving. I won't elaborate on how she was caught, but after a few years of a repeated pattern, somebody caught on. She was fired. Then charges were pressed. Executives went to court as witnesses. She ended up in prison for a few years. She's probably still there. She'll have to pay restitution when she gets out. Worst part, she has a kid that's about 10 years old. He got pulled from a life where everything was fine and great, and now he lives with his grandparents and his mom is in prison. We also had a pretty high-ranking executive that got silently fired for fricking a receptionist at a company party. He looked like Toby Flenderson from The Office. In a customer service center, which is made up of mostly women, this one male representative made himself an enemy of all the ladies there. They constantly made nasty comments toward him. He complained to his manager, but the manager didn't do anything. Fast forward to Easter. The guy brings in an Easter basket full of chocolates and puts them on his desk. He then goes on a 3-day vacation. Knowing he is gone, the ladies in the office take and eat some of the chocolates from his desk. On the 3rd day of his vacation, One of the ladies notices one of the chocolates broken and the basket has some sort of grass in it. It turns out, this dude dipped about 50 rabbit shoots in chocolate and put them in the basket on his desk. His defense: I didn't tell them to eat it. They were on my desk and they shouldn't have been taking things from my desk. Is it a policy violation for me to bring chocolate covered rabbit poop into the office? I didn't see that in the code of business conduct. TLDR. Employee brings chocolate covered rabbit poop into office in Easter basket. Ladies in the office all eat it up while he is on vacation. This man is either the hero your company deserves or the villain your company needs. Had an employee that worked in customer service department for a debt relief company. He had set up an arrangement with a creditor to reduce the balance on one of our client's credit cards. Then he called our client, let them know how much needed to be paid, about 7k, and then gave his personal information so it could be wired to him, and not the creditor. We only found out because our client called back in and spoke to someone else. She was at the bank and wanted to verify his name for wiring information. We then listened to his calls he had been making to verify all of this. He had been planning a vacation to Mexico and telling his girlfriend to go pick out whatever ring she wanted. We immediately let him go, and after pulling all his emails and listening to all his outbound calls, we found out that luckily it was his first time to try this, and no one got screwed. TLDR dickhead tried to steal a lot of money from an elderly client. I was the night manager of a grocery store and we had this guy Walter. Walter hated doing any work and would stretch his breaks so he could go down to the game stop and come back with the worst possible games. Yay bro, just picked up this sweet butt game. Track and field for the N64 inches. This was 2 years ago. He brought in a picture of the girl who played the yellow Power Ranger, hung it up in our break room, and under it posted some memoriam he had written up about her passing away. He then told us he would be collecting donations for her family. He came in wearing a red polo and grey dress pants. Our uniform is black and yellow, and when I asked him why he was out of uniform he said this is how Tiger Woods dresses and he is a champion. The worst was when he claimed he was not going to push carts anymore because he felt sick. I told him to take a break to calm down. About 5 minutes later, 2 paramedics come running into my store and head for the break room. I followed them only to see Walter laying on the floor and yelling I'm having a seizure. The paramedics had to leave the room, they were laughing so hard. He eventually got fired after he threatened to spray another kid in the face with mace if he didn't switch shifts with him. TL. Dr. Crazy Wally. Can't argue with wanting to be a champion. Started working in HR a year ago. One of my first meetings was a disciplinary with an individual suspected of spending his days watching P at work. What made things worse was that this fellow was our HR director, so we had to be absolutely watertight in our allegations that he was doing what he was doing. This involved me and a couple of other new starters working a late shift investigating each of the sites involved, which amounted to 14 pages of browsing history. We have a deal with a local takeaway, all-nighters and generally making an extra effort for the company get you your dinner delivered and paid for at the company's expense. TLDR. I stayed in late at work in order to watch P and eat pizza, and was regarded as a model employee for doing so. I'm not a manager, supervisor, or HR person, but when I worked in a call center I saw people fired for all of the following. Downloading P like at least 5 different times. Most notable was a guy who would download whole P movies and burn them to CDs and then sell them to the other employees, all on company time. Stalking a female employee who worked as a real estate agent part-time. He set up a time with her to see a house and attempted to abduct her by using a taser. In the process of dragging her out of the house he accidentally tased himself and she was able to escape and call the police. He was fired when he didn't show up to work because he was in jail. Stealing another employee's paycheck off their desk and cashing it. Going to a movie on the clock. Taking another job at another call center for more money. Called in sick for 2 weeks and then just stopping responding. Giving no indication if he was alive or dead. Company paid him for a whole month before they figured it out. Might have to try the last one eventually. In my early 20s I managed a 7-11. I came in one morning and asked the overnight shift guy how things were. He said uneventful. A few minutes later I was counting out the register and noticed a perfectly round hole in the counter next to it. I asked Figgy. Yes, Figgy. His name was Mike. but he wanted to be called Figgy if the maintenance guys had come in early to install a new point of sale or something on the counter. Hence the whole, he said, and I quote, "No, I had a gas run last night, and I got mad about it and shot the counter. It took me a few seconds before I did a double take and my best Sheila Broflovski what and he showed me the .38 revolver he apparently always had on him while working. I think having a .38 on you while working the graveyard shift at 7-11 is relatively necessary. Shooting the counter, on the other hand, is counterproductive." I used to manage a pizza shop in college. A girl we worked with would go to the bathroom 4 or 5 times a shift, often when we were incredibly busy. When I asked her if everything was okay, she started crying and told me to mind my own freaking business and quit. A few days later, her dad comes in and threatens to kill me if I kept harassing his daughter. I was all like, WTF, but come to find out she was telling her dad that the reason she quit was because I asked her to frick her in the bathroom. Long story short, put a lawyer on retention just in case and everything sorta blew over. I work at a grocery store's meat counter, and we hired an older gentleman who very explicitly hit on every young female that walked by. One time these 2 girls walked by, probably roommates or sisters, and very loudly he yells, "So do you ladies have a lot of fun with each other? I bet you do." Charm like that is rare nowadays. My first job ever was Guitar Center. I had been there about a year when they hired some new kid. Nothing new. The turnover rate is pretty dang high, since it takes a day or 2 for the computer system to acknowledge you and get your password set up. The ops manager put him in our back room to help the warehouse crew. Within 2 hours they were complaining that this new guy couldn't figure out crap, couldn't sort cables, couldn't read labels, and was clumsy with the merch. So the ops manager goes back to talk to he kid, only to find him in the corner, with one of the warehouse razor blades, cutting on his arm, with a creepy smile on his face and softly singing to himself. Needless to say, cops and paramedics were called, and we never saw the kid again. You haven't worked your real first workday until the blood is drawn. I wasn't the actual supervisor, but there was this girl at my work that had filed a couple claims for workman's comp because she said she hurt her knee at work. She basically had a month off of work, and when she did come back she milked her injury for all it was worth, leaving in the middle of her shifts or asking to be pulled off the registers almost immediately after she had gotten there. This might have flown a little better, though, if she hadn't consistently uploaded pics of herself on Facebook showing her and her friends going bowling, or going dancing. One time, this same girl called in sick for the day, leaving the cashiers severely short-staffed. I was mad because I had to come in early and stay later than my original shift, but I just thought, hey, it's money. Not even an hour after this girl was supposed to be at work, she came into the store to go shopping. I thought maybe I had misunderstood the situation and she actually had the day off or something, but I asked my supervisor, "Hey, Ashley called in sick." Right after my supervisor confirmed this, I said, "Well, she's right there, and she's shopping." My supervisor was P. So many stories. When we first turned on logging for our internet connection, we found out that our grave shift guy was looking at P for almost his entire shift. Who can look at P for 8 hours straight? A huge spike in bandwidth usage caused us to look into one particular user, who was apparently uploading videos of his wife doing other men to her swingers site. One of the guys in HR got fired for taking inappropriate pictures of the cocktail waitresses on the clock. Of course, the worst was the best tech I had. Guy was very bright, but socially inept. He had no idea how to interact with the end users. He'd inevitably end up insulting them. He was good enough at his job that I spent a long time trying to keep him. In the end, he just said the wrong thing to the wrong person. He very nearly cost me my job as well. Last I heard, he was working in a place where he had no public interaction, and was doing quite well. One guy we had working for us used to print off P pictures on a very heavily used printer at a very large corporation and would then go to the bathroom with them for 15 minutes. Was assistant to the department head for a production company. We hired a recording specialist from out of state, and when he agreed, he asked me could we get a job for my wife within the organization as well. I assured him we could find something for her. They relocated, and he comes in to do his hire paperwork with her. She doesn't have any unique skill set, the best she's going to get with us. or anywhere else, is a $10 PH office assistant. We detail the pay, duties, etc. as to what she'll be doing, and she goes watery-eyed and gets irate. She demands $60,000 a year to be her husband's assistant, to have no responsibilities, phrased as a light workload, whatever she thought needed to happen, to have a desk next to his. After stifling confusion and laughter, we explained that nothing like that existed. She turns, fuming with anger, to her husband, who looks at us, scared, and says, "You sure we can't make that happen?" We fired him 2 months later. His wife would constantly lock the two of them in their office. We assumed they were screwing, but they wouldn't answer the door to the studio, the phone extension in there, anything. Why is it so hard to get a job when dumbasses like this are working? This happened to a fellow night supervisor at a security company. We had one security guard assigned to vehicle patrol, driving around to various sites and calling in his patrols to our dispatch folks. There were no GPS trackers or anything on the vehicles at this time, so we supervisors would randomly tail the vehicle every few shifts just to make sure people were going where they said they were. This was well known amongst the guards. Shifts were chosen at random, so it was a good deterrent for people stray from their assigned routes. So dipshit security guard gets followed by his supervisor one night and promptly heads about 3 or 4 miles in the wrong direction and ends up at a casino in a ghetto-ish part of town. The guard changes from his uniform into t-shirt and jeans and disappears into the casino for about 2 hours. The whole time he is calling in his normal rounds to dispatch, while my colleague, his supervisor, seethes in the car outside. The supervisor called him a couple of times to check this or that reading on equipment at the sites he was supposedly patrolling, each time waiting a few minutes and calling in BS numbers. So the supervisor can't take it anymore, but obviously doesn't want to confront the guy in a casino, if for no other reason than he needs the vehicle to get back to base. So he calls the guard again and asks why the building he was currently patrolling had the fire alarm going off for the last 20 minutes and had its doors broken down by the fire department. All bulls. Dude can't come up with anything but I don't know. Supervisor tells him to get back to base immediately, then follows him the whole way there. As soon as he gets out of the car, the supervisor tells him, "I hope you won big tonight, cause you ain't got a job anymore," or something along those lines. It's never, ever fun to fire good people who screw up, but man is it ever fun to fire buttholes like this who think they're getting away with something. Worked for a friend during the summer as a supervisor running a paint biz. There was a ton of problems with young dumb kids who don't want to work hard, but one that sticks to mind is we had a kid who decided to wash his white paintbrush off in a stream next to this house. The stream was flowing into the homeowner's pond, which ended up turning all white and killing a bunch of his koi fish. So we ended up paying a good sized fine from the EPA for cleanup costs, and lost out on getting paid on that job. I used to be a recruiter for a big retail company. One time I was interviewing a dude for a manager position and I said, "Tell me about a time where you had to take charge of a difficult situation." This is a very standard interview question at that level and he should have had a decent answer. The story he told me: I was training to be a firefighter before I applied to this job. One time I was in charge of a training engine that was following the real engine on the way to a house fire. However, we got separated and the other truck had a mechanical failure. We got to the fire and I was faced with having to deal with the situation on my own. I was like, wow, that's really intense. What happened? I froze up and the house burned to the ground. Frick, dude, lie to me. I was a manager at several different title loan cash advance stores and these are my worst. 1. Girl refused to dress for an office setting. Kept wearing booty shorts and shirts with holes in them. Plus she had a grill. I offered to help her with some appropriate clothing so she did not have to be written up again. And she said, "I ain't dressing like no dang white girl." I fired her the next week for breaking dress code. 2. Girl was pregnant and nuts and would sit all day at my desk while I was out of office and eat cookies and drink from a gallon jug of Hawaiian punch. When lunchtime came she would sit right in front of the office in her car and blare loud obscenity-filled music. 3. This girl was actually my manager when I was AM. I had just started working there and it was only a 2-person office. Well, she acts super suspicious when certain accounts came due and said she would take those ones. Turns out she had taken out $30,000 in bogus check and title loans in friends and family's names. I finally found out and reported her because I recognized the name of one of the title's customers as her dead father. You know, I can't say I'm surprised. Most cash advance payday loan places look shady as frick. Doesn't quite fit the subject, but the employees in my life don't measure up to this. A manager at a store I worked at when I was 15 or 16 was found to have been watching dog pee on the work computer without clearing the history. Further investigation showed that he was also involved in an unsolved murder. Worked with him for a couple of years. Just me and him doing deliveries. Shudders. I'm not an hour guy, but I had a coworker get fired for basically not giving a crap. He played Minecraft and redditted most of his day away. When we put him on remote support with clients, he would do a half-assed job, close the ticket, and ignore the client's questions on the subject. He also basically came in whenever the frick he wanted. We all worked a 9-5 shift. This guy would show up anywhere between 10:30 AM and 2 PM on any given day. He was shocked when he was fired, made a huge fuss and acted all indignant and surprised about it. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.